Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need in Israel to succeed. Whether that is reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, job interviewing, complaining, all the everyday things you do in your native language in your country of origin, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. This program only works because it is user-focused and user-centric, so we always want to hear what topics you'd like us to transform into classes. You can always be in touch with us by email, Hebrew, that's Hebrew, at nbn.org.il. You can also find our page on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website. You can also be in touch with us by YouTube, which I'll show you in just a second, our own channel on YouTube. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you can also write to us in the chat window with any questions, comments, concerns, and requests you may have. We leave the chat open to any of those things. The Q&A is reserved only for questions related to the class we're about to start. Everything else is in the chat. I'll be reviewing the chat transcript after class, but the Q&A is the only thing I'll be looking at in this class. And we just ask that you keep the chat to a minimum in terms of personal conversation, but we want to leave that open for people who have questions, comments, concerns, or requests such as yourself. As I said, if this is your first time joining us, that is great. If you've joined us before, welcome back. We're currently at 270 participants, which, folks, let's take a step back. 270 people from literally around the world learning modern Hebrew at the same time is not a normal um, phenomenon that you find everywhere else. So we're really excited that you can all join us. We just went up to 276, so even better. But we have a wide variety of past lessons that we also review on a regular basis. For those who've forgotten or those who just simply don't know that we have many, many lessons on YouTube, I'm going to show you exactly how you access all of them. So if you go onto youtube.com, right, and you type in Cafe Au Lait, that's all you have to do. That's the name of our program. You can even just type in Nefesh B'Nefesh. But if you type in Cafe Au Lait at the top of the screen, youtube.com, the very first entry will say Cafe Au Lait Nefesh B'Nefesh playlist. You click on View Full Playlist. And sure enough, you will get our entire playlist, which as you see here is 146 videos, more than 23,000 views. You can watch any of them that you want. If there's a specific topic you want, you can also do a search up here for it. And when you click on them, especially the last, let's say 70 or 80, all right, first off, before we get to individual ones, you can also subscribe to this playlist by just clicking here, right? And it's in your library. If you click on any of the last 70 or so lessons, first off, you'll see me. You'll see the playlist running on the right-hand side, but if you scroll slightly down, you'll not only see the description of what that class is about, even though it's in the headline, you'll also see vocabulary. Click on this and you will get the vocabulary spreadsheet that goes with that class. Okay, it's very simple to get it. If that is too much information, folks, remember this class, like all of our previous classes, is recorded. So you can always go back. You can not only get the full class itself, but also the vocabulary just the way I showed you now. Okay. Um, Let me just make sure we have everything else in order. At the top of the hour, I'll break for questions that you've written in the Q&A. Remember, I'm only checking the Q&A, not the chat, and I'll talk about next week's classes as well. I also want to give a shout out because we're at our winter session, the start of our winter session. We also have our Cafe Au Lait Conversations classes. Those are on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Israel time here on Zoom, where the idea is that we take Monday's class, we transform it into conversation topics, that we break you out into very small rooms, usually no more than 3 to 4 people in a room, based on your current proficiency level with conversation starters. So you can practice the Hebrew you already have, plus the lesson we went over this week. Whether you join us or not on Mondays, anyone can join us on Wednesdays to join. It's really exciting. We have a very dedicated group that keeps growing there of all levels, from 0.5 to 4 plus. Okay, we start from very beginners there to very advanced. It's a great opportunity to be off the record because this class is recorded, and to actually be able to practice what we learned here and ask me questions directly and help each other out with your Hebrew. We're going to get started. Besides in our Wednesday class, and we'll talk about next week's classes as well at the top of the hour and answer your questions, let's just get into it. So as always, we try to mix things up each season with classes we've already done in the past and maybe need some review, and some new topics mainly generated by you. And we'll talk about those other classes in a little bit. But today's class is very much a review of something we do about every 6 months or so, which is a review of what I would call everyday expressions. And when I say everyday expressions, what's important here at Cafe Oleh, whether you've joined us before or not, I'm not a human dictionary. I mean, I am, and I can be, but that's not the point of this class. We don't go over things that you can easily look up in a dictionary or find out online or in any formal educational Hebrew education, right? We go over the things that usually formal education does not afford us when we're learning Hebrew, and yet are part of everyday lives in Israel. Great examples tonight's class, everyday expressions. These are often idioms, right? Expressions that if you looked at them, you wouldn't necessarily be able to translate them literally. But more importantly, these are expressions you're not necessarily going to learn in class. And having gone through many, many years of formal Hebrew education myself, one of the powers that we have here at Cafe Oleh is that we're teaching to Olim, for Olim, by an Oleh myself. I've been in this country now more than 18 years. We've been teaching Cafe Oleh around 7+ years now. So we're doing something right and we're learning and growing together. That's really important as well. We're a growing community, all of us, myself included. So today's topic is everyday expressions, and these are specifically things that you're going to hear all the time in a given street in Israel by native Hebrew speakers that you aren't necessarily going to learn in Ulpan or in day school or yeshiva or university, wherever it may be. Okay, so that's the topic. If there are things I'm not covering or I didn't cover, there sometimes is on purpose, again, because I'm not a human dictionary. We're not going to go over things that you can easily find, rather things that are harder. With that, let's get started. As always, if you've never joined us live or you're joining us on the recorded class, we base almost all of our classes on a spreadsheet, right? And the spreadsheet usually has the Hebrew in the middle. Transliteration for an American English audience on the right-hand side. There is no standardized form of transliteration from Hebrew to English. We have a previous class about that. And English on the left, if there's any notes, that'll also go on the left. Some of these are going to have example sentences, some of them are not. Part of Wednesday's class is going to be able to use these in real time with each other to practice using them. Because also language is as much about listening as well as speaking, but it is also about delivery, the tone, the pitch, the nonverbal communication that goes along with it. Okay, so let's get started with a great um, uh, series, 3 different expressions that almost all translate the same way, which is in English, what's with you, or what's the deal, or what's the deal with you is another way to translate it. מה יש לך, מה נסגר איתך, and מה הקטע or מה הקטע איתך. Okay, all 3 of these can be translated as what's with you, what's the deal. Okay, these are things, as you'll see in the sample sentence, are what you're going to say to someone when you're calling them out on behavior, right? Like I said, everyday expressions, you're not necessarily going to be able to give up, because if look up, if you were to look these up, these literally translate to what do you have, what is closed with you, and what's the deal, or what's the topic at hand, right? Or what's the section is a better way to translate the third one. But these don't translate. These are idiomatic expressions. That's different from slang. We're going to have a whole other class on updated slang terms towards the middle of this session, this season rather. But in the meantime, we're looking at these 3. מה יש לך, מה נסגר איתך, and מה הקטע or מה הקטע איתך. Okay, what's the deal or what's the deal with you? What's with you? Right. And another expression before we get to our sample sentence, so you see how these are used, is kol pa'am mechadash. Kol pa'am mechadash. Kol means all or every. Pa'am is time, as in a frequency, and mechadash, from anew, literally from anew, but this really means every time, can mean from scratch or every time anew. You'll see in the sample sentence. תגיד, מה יש לך? למה צריך לעשות בלגן כל פעם מחדש? You've probably heard an iteration of that sentence before. If not directed to you, directed to someone next to you, hopefully not at you, and certainly you've wanted to say this. What's your deal? What's wrong with you? What's the problem here? Tagid, מה יש לך? If you were saying this to a female, tagidi, מה יש לך? Okay, these are also able to be conjugated. Tagidi, מה יש לך? You would say to female. Tagid, מה יש לך? To a male. למה צריך, or צריכה if you're speaking to a female, לעשות בלגן. Why do you need to make a mess? Or why do you need to cause chaos? כל פעם, every time, מחדש, right? כל פעם מחדש, from scratch, every time. Every time from scratch, or anew. Right? The idea here is, מה יש לך, מה נסגר, או מה הקטע? You're calling someone out on their behavior. What's up with you? What's going on? Not as in, how are you doing? That's not what we're saying here. That's not clear from context. Let me make abundantly clear. We're not asking, how are you doing? This is, what's with you? Okay? And כל פעם מחדש, כל פעם מחדש שאני יוצא מהבית, every time from scratch, or every time I knew that I leave the house, אני מגלה עוד סדק בקיר. I find another crack in the wall. Right? That's something that you could, that's another way to use this כל פעם מחדש, every time anew, or every time from scratch. Okay? Sorry, just one second. Okay. Let's move on to a couple. This is a great one. I think they teach this now in Ulpan. If not, this is a really important one. You'll hear this all the time. זה מה יש or זה מה שיש. They both mean the same thing, which is that's what there is, or that's all there is. This one translates more literally. Ze is this or that. Ma is what, and yesh, there is. Ze ma sheyesh is the correct Hebrew. Ze ma yesh is sort of colloquial, a colloquial version of it. Both of them are acceptable. Both mean the same thing. That's what there is, right? So, for example, and we had a question by email. Can we go over expressions not just between you, the customer, in a store, but also from the employee? And we've done this multiple times in the past, but this is a great example of how we've done this multiple times in the past. If you were in a store, let's say a mishtala, a plant store, a greenhouse, and you ask, סליחה, יש עוד צמחים במחסן? Excuse me, סליחה, יש עוד צמחים? Are there more, or are there other plants, צמחים, במחסן, in the storage, in the back, in other words? Sorry, or סליח, or מצטער, or מתנצל, those are all acceptable ways in Hebrew to say sorry, including sorry. Excuse me. סליחה, זה מה יש. Sorry, that's all there is. Okay. A very simple one, but this one you'll hear a lot, especially coming from the other side, right? From the B2C way, business to consumer, right? Telling you that's all there is in stock, or that's all I got, or that can not just be, by the way, stock or something sold, that could also be something in terms of, that's all the information I got for you. That's all the energy I got for you today. זה מה יש. Okay. This one I use, I would say 3-4 times a day. כמו שצריך. כמו שצריך translates as it should be. As needed is the literal translation, but it's really as it should be, right? For example, a very appropriate and thankful, at least for this last, up until today, unfortunately with the news, סוף סוף הסופש מגיע, וזה כל כך שקט בחוץ, כמו שצריך. Finally, the weekend has arrived, and it's so quiet outside, כמו שצריך, as it should be. Right? כמו שצריך, as it should be. A great expression to use. Hal'a, literally hal'a, next. Hal'a means onward or quote unquote next. If you're writing, going down a list of chores or ticking off things that you need to do, or making sure that it's you have it at home or whatever it may be, or you're just going down a list of things, or whatever it may be, there's a sequence of events and you want to get from one to the other, you'll hear people say hal'a, means next. Okay. זהו, סיימנו להרכיב את מדף הספרים. That's it. We've finished constructing the bookshelf. הלאה, בוא נסדר את הספרים. Now, or next, let's arrange the books. Okay. הלאה, next. This is not the same as yalla and kadima. By the way, we've talked about a lot of slang before, and we will continue to follow it. Yalla is no longer considered slang in the sense that we use it all the time. Its origins are slang in that it's not Hebrew in origin, but we use it all the time. Kadima, however, is very old-fashioned Hebrew, and one of the things we don't usually say is you'll hear people say Kadima. It is not very in style to say Kadima. It's not that it's not understood, but we use Yalla all the time. It means the same thing, which is let's go. It also can mean about 10 different things, including hal'a. But hal'a really means the next thing in sequence or the next thing we need to do. Yalla kadima just simply means let's go forward, not necessarily with a given direction. Hala is understood there is a next thing in the sequence or an order that we need to do. Okay. Zchutcha or zchutech. This one is a direct translation, but it's an important one to understand the difference of it. I see we have a lot of people asking questions in the Q&A, which is awesome. Just remember, this is a frontal lecture, so if this is your first time joining us, this is a frontal webinar. There are 348 people on this call. Absolutely amazing. So I'm going to break when we get to the top of the hour and we get through this list. But I'm glad to see we have so many questions. Please keep asking them, by the way, in the Q&A, only related to this class, everything else in the chat. This brings up an important thing, especially for beginners with Hebrew. Zchutcha or zchutech. It's comprised of two things. The word zchut, zchut means right. Okay. Those of you who've made Aliyah or in the process of making Aliyah, you know about your zchuyot as olim chadashim, your quote unquote rights as new immigrants with regards to what you are entitled to, discounts, monies, things like that, right? Those are zchuyot. One of them is a zchut. In modern Hebrew, zchut is right, R-I-G-H-T, not as in right-hand side, but as in a right. And then the suffix, the possessional suffix that we've talked about several classes ago, right? Zchutcha. Zchutcha is referring to a male, your right, masculine, singular. If I want to say this to a female, it would be zchutech, right? It's your right, feminine, singular. Okay? But this brings up an important thing. In modern Hebrew, in fact, in ancient Hebrew as well, there is no conjugation for the verb to be in the present form. Okay, it's assumed either with the object, the subject that we're using, or in this case, it's just assumed at the beginning, right? There is no way to say it's in Hebrew. It's understood with zchutcha. And you're going to see that in our sample sentence right here. I actually had to use this a couple weeks ago. I had some issues with a certain company with regards to delivering a product that I had ordered. It took quite a long time. Once I said this to them, the product came quite fast in the mail. So we don't just give you these sample sentences out of nowhere. They really do have everyday practical meaning, which is a lot of what we do here at Cafe Oleh. זכותך לסמוך על מה שהשליח טוען. It's your right to trust what the delivery guy insists. כמו שזכותי לשקול מחדש להזמין מכם בעתיד. Love this sentence. Just as it is my right to consider it in the future, to reconsider, as I translated here, ordering from you in the future. Right? Remember we said kol pam mechadash, every time anew. We have here the same, a similar use of that word mechadash. lishkol mechadash. Lishkol is from the same root. Remember that all Hebrew words are comprised of roots. In Hebrew, a shoresh, three letters, sometimes two, sometimes four, and that has 50% of the meaning of the word. The other 50% is how we construct the word around the helper vowels and letters around the shoresh to give it its further meaning. In this case, this is the infinitive form of the verb with the shoresh shin kuf lamed lishkol. It has the same root as shekel, right? Israel's currency, shekel. Shekel in the Bible was a weight. Just like many currencies around the world, it was a weight and measurement used to determine the value of something, right? So lishkol in modern Hebrew is to weigh, Weigh, right? If you go to a supermarket or a shuk or somewhere where they need to weigh a product for you in order to determine its price, אפשר לשקול לי את זה, בבקשה? Right? This is how we say, can you weigh this for me, please? Lishkol. So to weigh anew, mechadash, from new, from scratch, right? So how did I use this term, zchutcha? It's your right, right? In English, we'll translate this as it's your right. The it's is part of English. Hebrew, it's not there. Zchutcha, it is your right. Lismoch al ma she'hashaliach to'en. It's your right to rely on or to trust what your delivery guy argues. Shaliach is a delivery guy in modern Hebrew, a courier. To'en is argues, insists. Kmo, just as zchuti. So instead of zchutcha, your right, it's now zchuti, my right. Lishkol mechadash, to reconsider, literally to weigh anew, to weigh from scratch, i.e., to reconsider. Lehazmin mikem be'atid, to order from you in the future. A great bargaining tool if you are not getting good customer service in Hebrew in Israel. Okay. These aren't so much idiomatic expressions. They're just really good ones to have under your pocket. This is very much everyday expressions. A lot of these happen to be idiomatic. This one's not. Kfisha. Kafisha is according to, or as, or like. Okay. And another word that we're going to use in the sentence, I use all the time, is kiragil. Kiragil, you'll hear all the time, as usual. We talked about false friends and cognates and words that happen to sound like English in Hebrew and words of English origin in Hebrew and vice versa. Ragil is one of them. Ragil is a completely Hebrew word. It's not even modern Hebrew, it's an ancient Hebrew. Ragil sounds like the word regular because it does mean regular or usual or normal. Kiragil, as usual. Okay. כפי שדווח בחדשות, as reported on the news, בתי הספר לא ייפתחו השבוע כרגיל. Schools, בתי הספר, לא ייפתחו, will not be open, השבוע, this week, כרגיל, as usual. Okay, this was unfortunately a headline for a long time in the last 14 months. Thank God, less so now. But כפי שדווח בחדשות, בתי הספר לא ייפתחו השבוע כרגיל. This sounds like a normal headline because it's written like a normal headline. First off, because כפי ש and כרגיל are used all the time in modern Hebrew. And second, something we talk about a lot here at Cafe Oleh, and we will always review again and again, the passive voice. Passive voice in Hebrew is good Hebrew. I know in English, being a native English speaker, passive voice is bad English, right? In Hebrew, it's really good Hebrew. It actually really is good English. It's considered a higher form of language and thus communication to use the passive voice when possible in Hebrew. English, we're often always told, don't use the passive voice. In Hebrew, it's the flip. And especially in media, in newspapers, in communications, you'll use the passive voice a lot. So it's an important one. And it's one of our distinguishing tools that when we break out into our breakout rooms on Wednesday, one of the defining ways to separate into groups is, are you familiar with and can you conjugate in the passive voice? Because that does make a significant difference in your communication skills. Okay. Everyday expressions. Toda merosh. I use this one all the time, especially if I'm writing to someone by email or it's the first time I'm texting them on WhatsApp or something like that. Toda merosh. Thanks in advance. Toda, thank you. Thanks. Merosh really gets translated as in advance. It comes from the word rosh, head, right? Something in advance. It comes from also the same root we get words like rishon, first, as in ordinal numbers, right? But toda merosh means thanks in advance. And another word, if you want to say something really nice in Hebrew, behekdem. Behekdem is very nice Hebrew when you want to say soon or shortly. Toda merosh al tshuvatcha. Thanks in advance for your answer. Nia bekesher behekdem. We'll be in touch shortly. How do I know this is really nice Hebrew? Two reasons. Number one, they're using the same expressions I just taught you. Toda merosh, thanks in advance, and behekdem, soon or shortly. But also because they're using that possession suffix, right? Toda merosh al tshuvatcha. They didn't say toda merosh al tshuva shelcha, right? In Hebrew, there are two ways to show possession, right? One is using the word shel, of, and then the declension of shel, sheli, mine, shelcha, yours, shalach, yours, feminine, and so forth. Or I can take that same suffix and put it on the noun that I'm modifying, right? So toda merosh al tshuvatcha. Thanks in advance for your answer. Nia bekesher behekdem. We'll be in touch shortly. If I want to say to someone in really nice Hebrew, ASAP, how do we say it? Behekdem ha'efshari. I'll even write it here. Excuse me. Behekdem ha'efshari. ASAP. As soon as possible, right? Behekdem, soon or shortly. Efshar or efshari is possible, right? The possible soonest is one way to literally translate it, but it's behekdem efshari is how we say ASAP in Hebrew. Okay? It's not abbreviated like it is in English, but obviously as soon as possible. Let me actually write that out so you all know as soon as possible. Don't want to take anything for granted here. A word that sounds like behekdem, and you might even use it in a similar context, is behetem. Behetem, accordingly or in accordance with. This term you hear a lot in the news. Those of you who are big reality show fans, when we have Ha'ach HaGadol here in Israel, Big Brother, and the hosts of it will tell the participants, "Na naheg behetem," and that becomes like a catchphrase that the whole audience says at the same time to the participants. "Na naheg behetem," please behave accordingly, right? Behave well. You're on TV, right? בהתאם להנחיות החדשות, in accordance with the new directives, אסור לרכוב על אופניים חשמליים ללא קסדה. It's forbidden to ride an electric bike without wearing a helmet. By the way, this is a law in Israel. If you didn't know that, you must wear a helmet when riding an electric bike, right? So in accordance with or according to להנחיות החדשות, אסור לרכוב על אופניים החשמליים ללא קסדה. Okay. Five expressions, excuse me, that all have the same base, which is the word kacha. Kacha, like yalla, can mean a lot of things in modern Hebrew. Kacha is Hebrew. Okay, it's through and through a Hebrew word, and each version you can actually have a whole sentence, a whole conversation rather. That's just these five words, these five expressions. Very much that kind of emotive list of things, right? So first off, kacha. Kacha gets translated as so, thus, like this or that, or simply because. If you want to answer someone, manis garitcha, right? We had that expression at the beginning of this sentence, of this class rather. What's with you? Kacha. Because, right? You're not giving in any answer other than kacha. It's giving off because I feel like it vibes, right? That's what it's saying when you say kacha. Just because I feel like it, just because is a great way to translate it. right? Kacha. Lama kacha. You've probably heard a native Hebrew speaker say in English, why like this? That's where this is from. Why like this is lama kacha. Why are you doing this? Right? Lama kacha is almost the same as our previous ones. Ma nisgar itcha, ma keta, ma yesh lacha. Lama kacha. Why are you doing it like this? Right? You can simply say lama kacha. Someone's messing around with something incorrectly, or they're messing around with something they shouldn't be touching in the first place. Lama kacha. Slicha lama kacha. Why like this? As we would say in translated literally from the Hebrew to English, but it means, why are you doing this? Why are you doing it like this? Kacha ze means that's how it is, and usually it's followed by some more detail, right? Kacha ze kshe. Kshe at the beginning of a word, this prefix kshe means when as in not a question. There used to be a tagline from, I think it was Cellcom about 20 years ago, one of the big telecommunications companies in Israel, and its tagline was "Kachazek she'oavim." That's how it is when you love, as in you're in love with the product or in love with each other or whatever it may be. Kachazek she'oavim. Right? If someone asks you "Lama kacha," so first off, one answer could be "kacha," and the other one could be "kachazek" or "kachazek she," and then you give some explanation, right? But all three of these part of the family of kacha. You've probably heard this expression when someone's asked you, how are you doing? Or you ask them how you're doing, and they answer, kacha kacha. That means so-so. Okay? Just so-so, kacha kacha. And then an older expression that you hear every once in a while, kacha stam. Just like that. This is the way, by the way, those of you who watch Sex and the City, this is how you would translate one of Carrie Bradshaw's trademark lines, kacha stam, and just like that. Okay? Another one you'll hear all the time. Kol echad vehablank shelo. To each his own. And what's different in the English expression to each his own in Hebrew gets specified. Kol echad ve'atam shelo. To each and everyone, to each and everyone their own taste in something. Right? If someone doesn't like a food, or you're the only one who likes something in a group, the other people can say about you, kol echad ve'atam shelo. To each and his own, to each his own taste, right? כל אחד style שלו. To each his own style, to each his own taste, to each his own preference, to each his own anything. In Hebrew, the difference is we personalize it in that we specify what we're saying is different by each person. Okay. Another great one, לא קרה כלום. לא קרה כלום. This is very adjacent to that classic Israeli expression, whether you like it or not like it, yeh besedo. Yeh besedo means it'll be okay. Lo kara klum is sort of like the past tense of it. Nothing happened. It's all good. It does translate as it's all good. Lo kara klum, right? Someone makes a mistake that isn't a big deal, or they're so embarrassed over spilling something, right? This is the answer. This is what you say to them to sort of ease their embarrassment. Lo kara klum. Literally nothing has happened, but understood as it's all good. A lot of times when we're learning modern Hebrew, and this is a lot of what we do here at Cafe Oleh, we're not learning how to apply it in real time, right? When we're sitting in Ulpan, we're not necessarily learning how do I express myself in Hebrew when I'm angry, or I'm annoyed, or I'm furious, or I'm frustrated, or all the everyday human emotions we have, because our vocabulary isn't there yet, because they think we're only able to do tov and lo tov, good and not good. We can advance beyond that, especially when the Hebrew we hear around us is more than that. This is a great example, azov. Azov is the command form of the verb la'azov. We've talked about this verb multiple times in the last season. La'azov means to leave something for good, to leave permanently. When you leave a job, whether you were fired or you quit, you use the verb la'azov. Okay, but we also use this verb to mean to leave something alone, as in to leave it alone or to leave me alone. right? So if you hear someone say azov, it means leave it alone. If they want to specify, and by the way, because this is a command, it does conjugate azov, azvi, azvu. The correct form is izvi and izvu. You're going to hear azvi for feminine, azvu plural. But azov, singular masculine, is usually the way that you're going to hear this, azov. If you hear someone say azov, it means leave it alone. That could be something to avoid. That could be something to just ignore altogether. Azov. If you want to specify something, it takes the direct object. And we had a whole class on direct objects several weeks ago. Again, yet another plug for our YouTube channel. What if I want to say leave me alone? How would I say it? Azov oti. Oti is the direct object me in Hebrew. Azov oti. Azov oti, leave me alone, right? Azov oto, leave him alone, right? It can get, there's a declension for it when we want to specify what we want to leave alone, or simply say azov. We had this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about I think it was directions, and we're going to talk about this again when we do telling time in several weeks from now. Because there is a cross-cultural issue in Israel about telling time, and one of them are these three words: baderech, techev, ototo. All these can be translated as on the way or soon, but these all have different cultural contexts that, again, if you're using an online dictionary, especially a certain notorious one, or you're learning this in class, you probably aren't learning the cultural nuances of when someone says to you baderech or techev or ototo. Baderech is the most ambiguous of the three terms that you're going to hear all the time. Baderech literally means on the way. But that could mean on the way as in I've yet to leave, but my head is already on the way. I use example on the way. I'll say to someone, Ani baderech, even if I haven't left the apartment yet, because I'm just putting the finishing touches on myself and packing up ready to go. Or I am literally in the middle of the road on the way to the person, right? Baderech. Techef means soon. If you go to a store that has a sign on it that says Techef Ashuv, it means I'm returning soon, right? I'll soon return. They stepped out, they used the bathroom, they're on a break, whatever it is. Techef Ashuv, I'll soon be back. Okay, Techef is sooner, and real soon is the word ototo. Now, there is a difference between these three terms in the sense that if someone uses ototo, they mean very soon. If they use techef, it means maybe in a few minutes, maybe in a half hour. But derech is a much bigger expanse of time that it could fill. It could be right now, or it could be in a long time from now. Okay, so these are three terms. When we talk about everyday expressions, we talk about idiomatic expressions. This is a great example of how, again, certain online translators are going to fail you because they're not going to give you the cultural construct and context in which we're using these terms. Okay. I'm going to try to finish up as quickly as possible because I see we have a bunch of questions up in the chat. Again, this is just a sample of everyday expressions. There's obviously many, many more we're not going to be able to get to. Future classes will definitely get to some, including more slang ones. Baktana, no big deal. It comes from the word katan, small. Baktana means no big deal. Katanalai is a more personalized way to say baktana. If something is small on me, the literal translation of katanalai, it means it's no big deal for me. Okay. If you conjugate the al, right? If you use the declension of al to refer to someone, yourself or someone else, it means it's no big deal for them. Katanalai, no big deal for me. המטלה הזאת לא, המטלה הזאת קטנה עליי. That chore is no big deal for me. Matala is a chore. Okay, versus gadol alai. Gadol is big, katan is small. Gadol alai does not translate literally, just like katan alai doesn't translate literally. Gadol alai means I'm in over my head. Gadol alecha, you're in over your head. Gadol alav, he's in over his head. Gadol aleha, and so forth. But gadol alai, I'm in over my head. The thing is too big for me or on me. Okay. Not sure why I have daikval here, but it's always a good one to remember. Enough already. This is always a funny joke, especially among native English speakers, that the word die in Hebrew means enough, right? If someone is screaming at someone else, die, they're not saying, I want you to drop dead. God forbid, that is a different word in Hebrew. Die in Hebrew means enough. Kval means already. So usually you'll use these two together. Die kval, enough already. Usually someone's going on and on. You want them to stop. They're talking too much, whatever it may be. Um, and go as quickly as I can with these. We've done some of these before, even in our last lesson. Ein li musag. Ein li musag is a really important expression. There's a number on here that I would highly recommend you focus on. I'm actually going to put some asterisks on these before we send them out, because these are the ones I really want you to focus on. Ein li musag is one of them. You are no longer going to say ani lo yodea. Okay? It's not that that's wrong. It's just not what you're going to use all the time. Ein li musag is what you're going to use to say I don't know, as in I have no idea. Ein li musag. Okay? That's a big one. The other big one are the next two, in fact. Stam. Stam we use all the time. We've gone over stam multiple times. We'll continue to go over stam. It's a really important one to master. Stam means mere or just. If you elongate it into stam, it's like I'm just kidding. We use this one all the time. And the expression minastam. Minhastam, or as you would say it, minastam. Minastam, it's basically one word elided between the two parts of it, means obviously or probably. Minastam hem lo bodkim hodaot. Kacha ze b'chufsha. Two of our expressions here at once. Minastam hem lo bodkim hodaot. They're probably not checking messages. Kachaze, that's how it is. We had that expression before. That's how it is, b'chufsha. That's how it is when you're on vacation. And then the reply is ken, kachastam. Yeah, you're probably right. Right? That's most likely the case. Kachastam. And then minastam. Kachaze, excuse me, and then minastam. Lo mshane. Lo mshane, you'll hear all the time. It's similar to lo chashuv, not important, but lo mshane. לא משנה, לא אכפת לי לאן הולכים היום. Doesn't matter. I don't care where we go today. לא משנה. לא מקובל על, a great one. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable what you say, and then you can further specify לא מקובל עליי. It's unacceptable to me. Unacceptable for anyone, you would use the declension of the preposition al. Im kol hakavod, with all due respect, this is what you say in Hebrew when you are showing disrespect, but you want to do it politely. Im kol hakavod, with all due respect. V'yesh kavod. It's a term that's used a lot in one of Israeli satire shows, and it's caught on in everyday life. Im kol hakavod v'yesh kavod, with all due respect, and there is indeed respect, but you're obviously not showing respect. I'm going to highlight. Actually, all of these are really good. Ani lo sovel. I love this expression. Lisbol in Hebrew, the verb lisbol means to suffer. So when you say ani lo sovel, it means I do not suffer that person, but it really means I can't stand them. Right? Ani lo sovel oto. I can't stand him. Or ani lo sovel et hamatzav. I can't stand the situation. Right? It's a great expression to be able to master. Ani lo sovel. And to describe something as insufferable is bilti nispal. Bilti is a prefix that we use as in or un, like we do in English. Bilti on its own is slang that we'll talk about in several weeks now. Bilti means that that person is impossible, right? Because we use this term bilti as a prefix for a lot of things to describe something in a negative way, like bilti nisbal, intolerable or insufferable, or bilti nimna, it's unavoidable, or bilti efshari, it's impossible, right? If you call someone bilti, it means that they are just impossible to deal with. You can't stand them. Ani lo sovel oto u bilti. That's a very slang term. Ani lo sovel is very much Hebrew, everyday Hebrew. And then finally, lelo safek, right? Lelo safek, without a doubt. Another great term to have. We've covered a lot of these before in the past. We'll continue to review these because review is an important part of learning a language. And like I said, there are many more expressions that I could have added. I'm already thinking about a whole bunch of other ones I want to add for future lessons. The point, though, is this is a great introduction to a whole lexicon of Hebrew that you have yet to learn in Ulpan. And honestly, you may not. That's why we're here to fill in the blanks or to fill in the gaps that you can speak and sound like a native Hebrew speaker, or at the very least, someone who lives here full time. With that, I see we have a bunch of questions. I'm going to get to as many as I can. I'm going to break just before the top of the hour to talk about next week's classes. Can you repeat what you said about YouTube? No. You will get a recording of this video and you will see step by step how I got there. So thank you for the question, but you will be able to see it yourself. Does mean what's with him? No. Okay. So let me say this again, like I prefaced at the beginning of the class. I see a lot of great questions asking me, doesn't this mean that or doesn't that mean that? Those are all great questions. If I'm explaining it here, it means it's something you can't necessarily look up in a dictionary, like I said at the beginning of the class. What's with the deal, as in what's with you, what's his problem? מה יש לך? מה נסגר איתך? מה הקטע איתו? Right? These are different ways to say what's the deal. Good. What's the difference between זה מה שיש וזהו זה? זהו זה is a different expression altogether. זה מה שיש means that's what there is. זהו זה is that's it. This is that's what there is. A difference in meaning, just like in English. Okay. Do people say kachaze? Yes, they definitely say kachaze. Like I explained, that was the catch line of a major telecommunication company many years ago. They still use it. Is sof sof eventually? Sof sof is not eventually, it's finally. Okay. Is ze ma sheyesh an answer to ma yesh lecha? No. What's with you, as in what's wrong with you? Let me impress that upon you again. People, please listen. Ma yesh lecha or ma nizgar itcha or ma haketa means what's wrong with you. Let me make that bigger letters here so you get that. These all mean the same thing, but it's not how are you doing? It's what's wrong with you, or what's your problem? Okay? The answer is not זה מה שיש. That's what there is. That's not an answer. Just like in English, that doesn't make sense. In Hebrew, that's not an answer. The answer to ma yesh lecha can be kacha, right? Just because. That's definitely an answer in Hebrew, but it is not anything else. Okay? Is bizchutcha by your merit? Okay. Um, I'm glad someone brought that up because that it brings up a very important reminder, especially for new people in this class. This is modern Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is comprised of a lot of different things, but we make a conscious decision to call it modern Hebrew because we are not going over liturgical Hebrew. We're not going over religious Hebrew or biblical Hebrew. Zchut can also mean merit. It absolutely can. In the context we're talking about the word zchut here, it means right. Zchuti means my right. Zchutcha, your right. Bizchut in religious minded Hebrew means bizchut, something is in the merit of someone. But in modern Hebrew, zchut also means right, R-I-G-H-T. I see someone else asking about is doesn't zchut mean merit? Merit, zchut is merit in a religious context. Zchut in everyday Hebrew means right, R-I-G-H-T, like rights in laws. Um, okay, I see a lot of people asking questions in general, not specific to this lesson. I'm trying to skim through them to get to any last ones I can do. Can kfishe be truncated to no? Kshe, no. Kshe means when, not in a question. Kfishe means according to. Those are two different meanings. Kfishe, according to. Kshe as a preposition, as a prefix, when. Can you explain what you mean by passive voice? If you don't know what passive voice is, reported on the news. The news is reported versus I report the news. The news is reported is passive voice. The news reports that is the active voice. Um, Okay, I see a lot of off-topic questions, folks, and we're getting towards the end of the class. I'm going to recommend a few things for people. First off, it is amazing how many new people there are. I can see that based on the questions we're getting. So thank you so much to all the new people who are joining, and equally thank you to everyone who's a returning participant. Toda raba lekulam. Number one. Number two, if you have a question I was not able to get to today, always email us, hebrew@nbn.org.il. There's a lot of you and just one of me, and we're offering this for free. So also keep that in mind when you're asking questions, especially off topic. Number three, I highly encourage you to all join our Wednesday classes, our conversation classes, where you'll able to practice these expressions that we just learned in certain settings. We're going to give you some conversation starting points. You'll be able to practice them at any level. I promise at any level. We have a lot of people at a beginner's level in these classes. We love people at a more advanced level in these classes. Okay. Not all these classes are going to be idiomatic expressions. In a few weeks, we're going to go over telling time. That might frustrate people at a higher level, but be perfect for people at a beginner's level. We're trying to accommodate as many people as possible in the big umbrella that is Hebrew learning. With regards to Wednesday's class, if you have not registered for it, it is a separate registration link you can find on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website. We have our own landing page there, but just go to the website and you'll be able to find it there. You will get a recording of this video. If not by email prompt, it will already be uploaded on YouTube in the next day or two. So keep your eyes out for that. Another reason to bookmark our YouTube page to make sure that you get all of our updates. With regards to next week's class, because it's always important to let you know what our next topics we're covering. Next week, we are talking about, next week is wintertime in Israel. Everything from how to describe the weather to types of clothing we only wear in the winter to food that is specifically eaten in the winter, all the different ways to celebrate winter time in Israel. This is not a holiday event. We're going to have another holiday class in 2 weeks' time, one of my favorite ones, because I remind people how to say the next major holiday in Israel in modern Hebrew. And it's probably not the way you hear it on a regular basis. That's a big clue. But wintertime in Israel. So we're going to talk about all the different ways we go through winter in Israel. Whether you like winter or not, it gets cold here. Cold may be relative for some people, but it's definitely going to get cold. If it's not already cold for you, how do we go through it in Israel together? In the meantime, Toda rabah, thank you all for joining. This class will go up on YouTube in the next day or two. You will get the attached vocabulary sheet that we just went through as well. Wednesday, we highly encourage all of you to join us for our conversation class. You'll be broken up into smaller groups to be able to practice these expressions and more that we went through. And next week, we'll see you back here Monday, 8 p.m. Israel time. In the meantime, toda rabah. Thank you all so much, and lehitraot. See you all very soon.